Can you take it to the very practical level, Dr. Miller? What are some practical steps that the Christian can employ to grow in their prayer life?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One is make an appointment with God. And we all know what an appointment is. You put it on your calendar, and there are some appointments that you say, I could skip that. There are some appointments you say, this is non-negotiable. That's the sort of appointments we need with the Lord. And if someone's not in the habit of prayer, you probably shouldn't start with an hour because that's probably not going to work out well for you.
Peter couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's right. He fell asleep. So start with 5 minutes and then work your way up. But put it on the calendar. This is what I'm going to do. Schedule the appointment. Second, I think sometimes our prayer lives fail because we haven't structured our prayers. And so we just come to the Lord and we're just thinking through our mind, what do I need to pray for? And we haven't written down what we need to pray for. We don't have an idea of what we should do. And I would suggest any believer to walk through what's often called the Lord's Prayer, but really the disciples' prayer, and structure your prayer around that. Our Father. Okay, so begin by recognizing who God is, who is in heaven. Recognize the power and the immensity. Just go line by line through that. And then think of how you can say something that isn't always exactly the same thing as that, but is consistent with what that's doing. And that will, I think if you did that, you could easily pray for 15 minutes a day, and it's structured right there for you. And really all the things we need to pray for are in that prayer. Mm-hmm. So I think the structured prayer helps quite a bit. Praying Psalms has been a really helpful thing for me. And there's a couple of books on praying Psalms that are useful. But just going through a Psalm, reading it, and then going back through it while praying and thanking the Lord when it thanks the Lord, calling upon the Lord when it calls upon the Lord. As the passage brings to mind a believer who's struggling with something, then pray for that believer and continue through the psalm. I think that's a really helpful way of engaging in prayer. And then I think prayer journals can be really helpful. This, again, helps you to structure. But one of the things that we often miss out on, in my opinion, is that God answers our prayers, and then we forget that God answered our prayers. And I wonder how many prayers God has answered for me that I've just forgotten that he's answered. And the joy of being able to walk back through and just seeing what God has done. Because I'm just convinced my memory is not great, and I can think of things that even recently that are already on the edge of being forgotten.
Right.
But if they're written down and I can walk through them and I can say, God, thank you again for that. Thank you again for that. So that helps on both sides there and gives you, then when your spirits are low, you can just go back through and say, Lord, look how faithful you've been, because he is, and he always is.
How about another one? What do you think of praying out loud? Maybe not commanded in Scripture. To me, maybe it's more like folding your hands and closing your eyes to eliminate distractions. The disciples heard Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. So one wonders, what do you think of praying out loud versus praying in your heart?
Yeah, and it depends on who's around and what context you're in. But for sure, praying out loud can be a really useful context for some people who struggle with it just staying in their minds. And so by verbalizing it, it makes it more real to some people. And if that would help some people, for sure, that's a wonderful tool.